"Sir, you can sit here. Heroes shouldn't have to stand in the rain." The little girl's voice was soft, yet it carried through the steady drizzle like a note of warmth on a cold afternoon. Beneath the gray November sky in downtown Chicago, 8-year-old Amora Johnson held a faded blue umbrella over a frail elderly man whose weathered hands trembled against the chill. Cars whispered past on rain-slick streets, their headlights reflecting in silver streaks across the pavement, while the golden glow from an upscale restaurant spilled onto the sidewalk like a promise reserved for someone else. The old man looked up, startled, his pale blue eyes filled with quiet disbelief. His coat was threadbare, its edges worn from years of use, and a row of military ribbons rested carefully on his chest as if they were the last pieces of dignity he owned. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said gently, his voice rough but kind. Amora smiled, her dark braid swaying slightly as she adjusted her grip on the umbrella. "My grandma says kindness keeps people warm longer than any coat," she replied. A few steps away, well-dressed patrons lingered beneath the restaurant's canopy, their laughter sharp and dismissive as they watched the scene unfold. One woman in a tailored ivory coat glanced over with a curled lip. "Look at that," she muttered to her companion. "A street kid playing charity." Another man chuckled, shaking his head. "Probably begging for attention." Their words drifted through the damp air, but Amora didn't flinch. She had heard worse before. Instead, she reached into her worn canvas bag and pulled out a small paper sack, its edges softened by the warmth inside. "I saved you a sandwich," she said, holding it out with both hands. "It's not much, but it's fresh." The old veteran hesitated, emotion catching in his throat. "You shouldn't give away what you need," he said softly. Amora lifted her chin, her brown eye steady with quiet pride. "Everyone deserves to eat," she answered. The man accepted the bag with trembling hands, as if it were something sacred. Raindrops tapped gently against the umbrella, forming a rhythm that echoed the slow, steady beat of compassion in a world too busy to notice. Above them, the restaurant's crystal chandelier shimmered through the tall windows, casting reflections that sparkled like distant stars. Inside, polished marble floors gleamed beneath elegant heels, while outside, Amora's scuffed sneakers stood firm against the cold concrete. Two worlds separated by glass, divided by wealth, yet bridged by a single act of kindness. As the veteran unwrapped the sandwich, a small object slipped from his pocket and clinked softly against the ground. Amora bent down and picked it up, a tarnished silver medal engraved with an eagle and shield, its ribbon faded but intact. She brushed away the raindrops and placed it gently into his hand. "You dropped this, sir," she said with reverence. The old man stared at the medal, his eyes glistening with memories long buried beneath time. "That," he whispered, "is the only thing I have left from the day I was called a hero." Amora's gaze softened. "You still are," she replied. Across the street, the low hum of an approaching Blacktown car cut through the rain as it slowed near the curb, its headlights illuminating the quiet exchange. The city seemed to pause, as if holding its breath, while the veteran clutched the medal and the little girl held the umbrella steady above him. In that fleeting moment, beneath a sky heavy with clouds and doubt, dignity stood unshaken, kindness shone brighter than gold, and destiny quietly prepared to reveal a truth that would change everything. The Blacktown car idled at the curb, its engine humming softly like a restrained whisper of power, while rain continued to fall in a delicate silver curtain over the glowing streets of Chicago. Amora Johnson barely noticed it at first, her attention fixed on Walter Hayes as he held the sandwich with quiet reverence, his trembling hand steadying as warmth replaced the chill that had clung to him for hours. The city's neon reflections shimmered across puddles at their feet, and for a fleeting moment, the world seemed suspended between hardship and hope. Inside the restaurant, crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over polished marble floors, and patrons lingered by the windows, watching the scene outside. With a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. A man in an expensive charcoal suit smirked as he sipped his wine. "It is astonishing," he muttered, "how some people mistake pity for purpose." A woman beside him laughed softly, her diamond bracelet catching the light. She should focus on helping herself first. Their voices, though hushed, carried through the glass doors whenever they opened, drifting into the rain like cold echoes of judgment. Amora heard them, but her expression remained calm, a small hand steady as she adjusted the umbrella to shield Walter from the wind. "Are you warm enough, sir?" she asked gently. Walter nodded, his pale blue eyes glistening beneath the brim of his worn cap. "Warmer than I have been in a long time," he replied. He glanced at the silver medal resting in his palm, its tarnished surface reflecting the city lights. "This was given to me 50 years ago," he said quietly. "Back when people still remembered what sacrifice meant." Amora's gaze softened with respect. "They still do," she answered. "Sometimes they just need to be reminded." Walter studied her for a moment, struck by the quiet strength in her voice. "What is your name, young lady?" he asked. "Amora Johnson," she said proudly. "My grandmother says it means grace." A faint smile touched his lips. "It suits you." The restaurant doors opened once more, and a sharply dressed hostess stepped outside, her heels clicking briskly against the stone. She glanced at Walter and Amora with polite impatience. "You cannot remain here," she said coolly. "You are blocking the entrance." Amora lifted her chin, her voice gentle but firm. "We will move. We just wanted to stay out of the rain." Walter began to step back, but Amora steadied him with a reassuring hand. Just then, the Blacktown car's rear door opened silently. A tall man in his early 30s stepped out, his tailored navy overcoat brushing against his knees as he surveyed the scene. His presence carried quiet authority, the kind that did not demand attention but commanded it effortlessly. Raindrops dotted his dark hair as he paused beneath the streetlight, his gaze drawn to the elderly veteran clutching the medal and the young girl holding the umbrella above him. His driver remained by the vehicle, respectfully silent. Inside the restaurant, whispers rippled among the guests as they recognized the newcomer. "Is that Alexander Hayes?" someone murmured. "The billionaire," another voice replied in awe. Alexander's eyes lingered on Walter, confusion flickering across his composed features as he noticed the familiar engraving on the silver medal. He took a slow step forward, the rain soaking into his coat, as if drawn by something deeper than coincidence. Meanwhile, Amora remained unaware of the shift unfolding behind her. She reached into her bag once more and pulled out a neatly folded napkin, offering it to Walter with a warm smile. "Here, sir," she said softly. "So your hands stay dry." Walter accepted it, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Amora. You have given me more than food tonight. You have given me dignity." As the rain fell gently around them, the glow of the city lights framed the trio in a quiet tableau of compassion and destiny. And just beyond the halo of light, Alexander Hayes stood still, his breath catching as recognition began to stir, unaware that the small act of kindness before him was about to reclaim a past he thought was lost forever. The rain softened into a gentle mist as the glow of the streetlights painted the sidewalk in hues of amber and gold, and Alexander Hayes stood motionless beneath the evening sky, his gaze fixed on the silver medal resting in Walter Hayes's trembling hand. The world around him seemed to fade into a distant murmur of passing cars and muted conversations, replaced by the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. He had seen that medal before. He knew every ridge, every engraving, every story etched into its surface. It had once hung in a place of honor above the fireplace in his childhood home, a symbol of courage and sacrifice that had shaped his understanding of dignity and duty. And yet, for years, it had been missing, just like the man who had earned it. Amora Johnson, unaware of the storm of emotion stirring behind her, continued to hold the umbrella over Walter with quiet determination, her small frame unwavering against the damp November air. "Are you feeling better, sir?" she asked gently. Walter nodded, his voice warm with gratitude. "I am, thanks to you, young lady. You remind me that goodness still walks this earth." His words drifted softly into the night, but Alexander heard them clearly. Taking a slow step forward, he allowed the rain to fall against his coat as he approached. The soft tap of his polished shoes against the pavement drew Walter's attention first. Walter lifted his eyes, studying the stranger with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. Alexander stopped just a few feet away, his expression composed yet touched with something deeper, something fragile and long buried. "Excuse me," he said quietly, his voice steady but reverent. "May I see that medal?" Walter hesitated for a moment, then extended it carefully, trusting the sincerity in the young man's eyes. Alexander accepted it with both hands, as though it were a sacred relic. The cold metal felt achingly familiar against his fingertips. He traced the engraved eagle with his thumb, and memories flooded back with startling clarity: a young boy sitting on his father's shoulders during a 4th of July parade, the scent of barbecue drifting through a summer afternoon, and the proud smile of a soldier who had once told him that honor was measured not by wealth, but by character. Alexander's voice faltered ever so slightly. "This medal was awarded to a Sergeant Walter Hayes for extraordinary bravery," he said softly. "It was presented by the United States Army in 1973. Walter's breath caught. "Yes," he replied, astonished. "That is correct." Alexander looked up, his eyes shining with recognition. "I know," he whispered. "Because you are my father." The words hung in the air like a quiet bell, resonating through the stillness of the evening. Amora's eyes widened in disbelief, her grip tightening gently around the umbrella as she looked from one man to the other. Walter stared at Alexander, his face trembling with emotion. "Alexander," he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alexander nodded slowly, emotion softening the sharp lines of his features. "I have searched for you for years," he said. "I never stopped hoping you were alive." A hush fell over the onlookers gathered near the restaurant entrance. The mocking expressions that had once filled their faces faded into stunned silence. The hostess lowered her gaze, and the whispers that had once carried judgment now dissolved into quiet awe. Walter's eyes filled with tears as he reached out, his weathered hand trembling. Alexander clasped it gently, his grip firm yet tender, as though afraid the moment might disappear. "You have grown into a fine man," Walter said, his voice thick with pride. Alexander smiled softly. "Because you taught me what it means to be one." Amora watched the reunion unfold, her heart swelling with warmth. She lowered the umbrella slightly, allowing the gentle mist to brush against her face as a smile illuminated her features. In that instant, beneath the glow of the city lights and the soft patter of rain, the distance between past and present vanished. The veteran who had once stood alone was no longer forgotten, and the kindness of a little girl had restored a bond thought lost to time. As the black town car's headlights shimmered across the wet pavement, Alexander turned to Amora with gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly. "Tonight, you did not just offer shelter from the rain. You brought a family back together." And as the city of Chicago continued its endless rhythm around them, the quiet power of compassion transformed an ordinary evening into a moment that would be remembered forever. The soft rain faded into a mist that shimmered beneath the amber glow of the streetlights, wrapping the sidewalk in a quiet stillness as Alexander Hayes stood beside his father, his hand still clasping Walter Hayes's weathered fingers. The city of Chicago moved around them in a gentle blur of headlights and distant horns, yet within that small circle of light, time seemed to pause. Walter gazed at his son with disbelief and pride, his pale blue eyes glistening as memories resurfaced like forgotten melodies. "I never imagined I would see you again," Walter said, his voice trembling with emotion. Alexander's expression softened, his composure giving way to a warmth he had not felt in years. "I searched everywhere," he replied gently. "But the trail went cold after you left the hospital. I thought I had lost you forever." Walter lowered his gaze, his shoulders rising and falling with a quiet sigh. "I did not want you to see me struggle," he admitted. "You had a future to build, and I did not want my burdens to become yours." Amora Johnson listened quietly, her small hand still gripping the handle of the umbrella as she watched the reunion unfold with wide, shining eyes. The rain-speckled pavement reflected the trio like a painting of grace and destiny. "You are not a burden," Alexander said firmly, his voice steady with conviction. "You are the reason I became the man I am today." Walter's lips trembled into a faint smile. "You always had a good heart," he whispered. "Your mother would be proud." At the mention of her, Alexander's eyes flickered with emotion, but he nodded. "Everything I built was inspired by you both," he said. "Every company, every decision, every success. I never forgot where I came from." Nearby, the restaurant patrons who had once whispered with disdain now watched in silence. The hostess shifted uncomfortably, her earlier impatience replaced by embarrassment as she realized the significance of the moment unfolding before her. The chandeliers behind the glass doors glimmered like distant stars, their reflections dancing across the wet pavement. Alexander turned to Amora, his gaze filled with gratitude. "You stood by him when no one else would," he said softly. "You offered him kindness without asking for anything in return. That is a rare and beautiful thing." Amora smiled shyly, her dark eyes bright with sincerity. "My grandmother always says that respect does not cost a penny," she replied. "And everyone deserves it, especially a hero." Walter looked down at her, deeply moved. "You reminded me of who I used to be," he said gently. "And who I still am." Alexander nodded, his voice rich with admiration. "You did more than that. You gave him dignity, and you gave me back my father." The word settled into the evening air, drawing a respectful hush from those nearby. Even the rain seemed to pause. In reverence, Alexander gestured toward the black town car waiting at the curb, its polished surface reflecting the glow of the city lights. "Please," he said warmly. "Allow me to take you somewhere warm and comfortable. We have much to talk about." Walter hesitated, glancing at Amora before turning back to his son. "Only if she comes with us," he said gently. "She is the reason we are standing here together tonight." Alexander smiled, his expression filled with respect. "It would be an honor," he replied. He turned to Amora. "Will you join us?" Amora hesitated for a moment, her heart fluttering with uncertainty, then nodded with quiet confidence. "Yes, sir," she said softly. As the driver stepped forward to open the car door, a sense of wonder settled over the sidewalk. The murmurs of the crowd faded into silence as Walter carefully tucked his medal into his coat and accepted Alexander's arm. Together, the three of them walked toward the waiting vehicle, their reflections shimmering in the rain like symbols of redemption and grace. The city lights gleamed across the wet streets, illuminating a truth that could no longer be ignored. Kindness had bridged the distance between hardship and hope, and a simple act of compassion had restored a family once thought lost forever. The black town car glided smoothly through the rain-soaked streets of Chicago, its polished surface reflecting streaks of gold and crimson from passing traffic lights as the city skyline shimmered beneath the misty November night. Inside the quiet cabin, warmth replaced the chill of the evening, wrapping Amora Johnson, Walter Hayes, and Alexander Hayes in a gentle stillness. The soft hum of the engine blended with the rhythmic patter of rain against the tinted windows, creating a cocoon of comfort that felt worlds away from the cold sidewalk they had just left behind. Amora sat carefully on the edge of the leather seat, her worn sneakers tucked neatly beneath her as she gazed out at the glowing city with wide-eyed wonder. She had never ridden in such a car before, and the quiet elegance of its interior seemed almost unreal. Across from her, Walter held his silver medal with reverence, his fingers tracing its engraved eagle as though reacquainting himself with a long-lost friend. Alexander sat beside him, his posture composed yet softened by emotion, unable to take his eyes off the father he had thought lost to time. "Are you comfortable?" Alexander asked gently, his voice carrying the calm assurance of someone accustomed to power yet grounded in humility. Walter nodded slowly. "More than comfortable," he replied. "I feel as though I have been given a second chance." Alexander smiled, the warmth in his expression replacing the restraint he had carried for years. "We both have," he said quietly. "And we owe it to her." He glanced toward Amora, his eyes filled with gratitude. Amora shifted slightly, her cheeks warming under his gaze. "I was only trying to help," she said softly. "My grandmother always tells me that when you see someone in need, you do not walk away." Walter looked at her with admiration. "Your grandmother is a wise woman," he said. "She raised you with a heart full of honor." The car slowed as it passed beneath the golden glow of street lamps lining Michigan Avenue, their reflections rippling across the rain-slick pavement. Skyscrapers stretched toward the heavens like monuments of ambition, their windows sparkling against the dark sky. Alexander followed Amora's gaze and smiled. "Chicago looks different when you see it like this," he said. "Every light tells a story." Amora nodded, her eyes shining. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Like a city made of stars." Walter chuckled softly. "When Alexander was a boy, he used to say the same thing," he said. Alexander laughed quietly, the sound rich with nostalgia. "You would lift me onto your shoulders so I could see the skyline over the crowd on the 4th of July, he recalled. Walter's eyes glistened with emotion. "Those were good days," he said. "The best." A comfortable silence followed, filled not with emptiness but with understanding. The years that had separated father and son seemed to fade with every shared memory, replaced by the quiet promise of reunion. As the car turned onto a quieter avenue lined with elegant buildings, Alexander spoke again. "We are almost there," he said. "I would like to take you both somewhere warm for dinner. It has been far too long since we shared a meal together." Walter hesitated, glancing at Amora. "Only if she joins us," he said firmly. "She is the reason we found each other tonight." Alexander inclined his head with respect. "Of course," he replied. "She is our honored guest." Amora's eyes widened. "I have never eaten in a place like that," she admitted shyly. Alexander's voice softened with reassurance. "Then tonight will be your first," he said. "Because kindness deserves to be welcomed with dignity." Outside, the rain began to fade, leaving the streets glistening beneath the city lights. As the town car came to a gentle stop before an elegant building adorned with glowing lanterns, the driver stepped out to open the door. A warm breeze drifted through the air, carrying with it the promise of comfort and belonging. Walter straightened his coat, carefully tucking his medal close to his heart, while Amora adjusted her small canvas bag. Alexander offered his arm to his father and extended his hand to Amora with a gracious smile. Together, they stepped onto the polished pavement, their reflections shimmering in the fading rain. In that quiet moment beneath the soft glow of the lanterns, it became clear that destiny had woven their paths together, guided not by wealth or status, but by the simple, unwavering power of compassion. The warm glow of golden lanterns bathed the sidewalk as Alexander Hayes guided Walter Hayes and Amora Johnson toward the entrance of the elegant restaurant, where polished glass doors reflected the shimmering lights of downtown Chicago. The rain had faded into a gentle mist, leaving the pavement glistening like liquid silver beneath their feet. A uniformed doorman opened the door with respectful precision, his expression shifting from routine courtesy to quiet astonishment as he recognized Alexander. "Good evening, Mr. Hayes," he said, stepping aside with a slight bow. "Welcome back." Alexander nodded graciously. "Thank you," he replied, his voice calm and composed. "We have 3 for dinner." As they stepped inside, warmth enveloped them instantly, carrying the soft scent of fresh bread and roasted herbs. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a golden glow across marble floors and linen-draped tables, while the gentle notes of a piano floated through the air like a melody of quiet sophistication. Conversations hushed as patrons glanced up, curiosity flickering across their faces. Moments earlier, these same individuals had stood behind the glass whispering in judgment, but now their expression shifted into uneasy silence. Amora hesitated just inside the doorway, her eyes wide as she took in the grandeur around her. The polished floors reflected her small figure, and for a brief moment she felt out of place. Noticing her uncertainty, Walter offered a reassuring smile. "Stand tall, my dear," he said gently. "Dignity does not depend on where you stand, but on who you are." Amora straightened her shoulders, her voice soft but steady. "Yes, sir," she replied. Alexander glanced at her with admiration. "You belong here as much as anyone," he said kindly. "Tonight, this place is honored by your presence." The maître d', impeccably dressed in a black tuxedo, approached with a respectful smile. "Mr. Hayes, it is a pleasure to have you with us," he said. "Your private table is ready." He led them past rows of elegantly dressed guests whose hushed whispers lingered in the air like fading echoes. Some lowered their eyes in quiet embarrassment, while others watched with newfound respect. Amora noticed the change but remained composed, her calm grace reflecting the lessons her grandmother had taught her. They arrived at a table near a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Chicago River, where city lights shimmered like scattered diamonds upon the water. As they took their seats, a server poured sparkling water into crystal glasses, the soft clink echoing gently in the refined atmosphere. Walter gazed out at the skyline, his eyes filled with wonder. "It has been many years since I have seen the city like this," he said quietly. Alexander smiled. "It has changed," he replied. "But tonight, it feels as though it has come full circle." Amora folded her hands neatly in her lap, her voice filled with awe. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Like a dream." Walter looked at her fondly. "Dreams often begin with kindness," he said. A leather-bound menu was placed before them, but Alexander set his aside. "Order anything you wish," he told Amora gently. "This evening is a celebration." She hesitated, glancing at Walter. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. Alexander nodded. "Absolutely." Walter chuckled warmly. "After all," he said, "you have already given us more than we could ever repay." As the pianist's melody drifted through the room, the tension that had once filled the space dissolved into quiet admiration. The same patrons who had once judged from behind the glass now witnessed a moment of grace unfolding before them. The hostess who had earlier asked them to leave approached with humility, her voice gentle. "Mr. Hayes," she said softly, "on behalf of the restaurant, please accept our sincerest apologies." Alexander met her gaze calmly. "Kindness is apology enough when it is genuine," he replied. She nodded gratefully before stepping away. Amora looked from Walter to Alexander, her eyes shining. "I never expected any of this," she admitted. Walter smiled, his voice filled with warmth. "Neither did I," he said. Alexander raised his glass, his expression radiant with gratitude. "To new beginnings," he said. Walter lifted his own glass with steady hands. "To family rediscovered." Amora followed, her small smile glowing beneath the chandelier's light. "And to kindness," she added softly. Their glasses touched with a gentle chime, a sound as clear and hopeful as the future unfolding before them. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the river, and inside, beneath the golden glow of crystal and candlelight, three lives once separated by circumstance were united by compassion, dignity, and the quiet power of a single selfless act. The gentle melody of the piano drifted through the candlelit restaurant as the last echoes of their toast lingered in the air, wrapping the table in a quiet sense of gratitude and wonder. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Chicago River shimmered beneath the glow of city lights, its rippling reflections dancing like scattered diamonds against the night. Amora Johnson sat upright in her chair, her small hands resting neatly in her lap as she absorbed the elegance around her, her wide brown eyes reflecting the chandelier's golden brilliance. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness could lead her to such a moment, yet the warmth in her heart felt more radiant than any crystal or marble that surrounded her. Walter Hayes watched her with a gentle smile, his weathered face softened by pride. "You carry yourself with grace, Amora," he said warmly. "It reminds me of someone very dear to me." Amora tilted her head curiously. "Who, sir?" she asked. Walter's gaze shifted toward Alexander, his eyes shining with memory. "His mother," he replied softly. Alexander lowered his eyes for a moment, touched by the mention, then looked up with a quiet smile. "She believed that kindness was the greatest form of strength," he said. "She used to tell me that the true measure of a person was not what they owned, but what they gave." Amora nodded thoughtfully. "My grandmother says something similar," she said. "She tells me that when you help someone, you are planting a seed that will bloom when the world needs it most." Walter's expression brightened. "Your grandmother is a remarkable woman," he said. "I would be honored to meet her someday." Alexander leaned forward slightly, his voice filled with sincerity. "And I would like to ensure she has everything she needs," he added. "You have done more for us tonight than you can imagine." Just then, the server arrived with their meals, presenting them with care. Aromas of freshly baked bread, roasted vegetables, and perfectly prepared entrees filled the air, creating a comforting contrast to the cold rain that had marked the beginning of their evening. Amora hesitated as a porcelain plate was placed before her, her eyes widening in disbelief. "This looks too beautiful to eat," she whispered. Walter chuckled softly. Beauty is meant to be enjoyed, he said. Please, my dear, you have earned every bite. Encouraged by their warmth, Amora picked up her fork with careful hands, savoring the first taste with quiet delight. A smile spread across her face, glowing brighter than the candlelight. It is wonderful, she said, her voice filled with awe. Alexander watched her with admiration. Tonight is only the beginning, he said gently. Kindness like yours deserves a future filled with opportunity. As they dined, their conversation flowed easily, weaving together stories of past and present. Walter recounted moments from his years of service, speaking not of hardship but of camaraderie and honor. Alexander listened with reverence, rediscovering pieces of his father's legacy that had shaped his own journey. Amora listened intently, her eyes shining with inspiration, as though each story was a lesson etched into her heart. Across the room, guests who had once whispered now watched in respectful silence, their earlier judgment replaced by admiration. The soft glow of candlelight illuminated the trio like a portrait of dignity and redemption, a reminder that true wealth was found not in possessions, but in compassion. As dessert arrived, a delicate slice of chocolate cake adorned with a single strawberry, Alexander gently set his fork aside and reached into his coat pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box and placed it before Amora with a warm smile. This is not payment, he said softly. It is a token of gratitude. Amora hesitated, glancing at Walter. Walter nodded reassuringly. Accept it, child, he said. It comes from the heart. With careful hands, Amora opened the box to reveal a delicate silver bracelet engraved with the word grace. Her breath caught as the candlelight reflected off its polished surface. It is beautiful, she whispered. Alexander's voice was gentle. Just like the kindness that brought us together. Amora's eyes filled with emotion as she fastened the bracelet around her wrist. Thank you, she said softly. Walter raised his glass once more, his voice filled with warmth and pride. To the light that shines brightest in the darkest night, he declared. Alexander lifted his glass in agreement. To Amora, he said. Amora smiled shyly as their glasses chimed, the sound resonating like a promise carried on the evening air. Beyond the windows, the city sparkled beneath the night sky, and within the glow of candlelight, 3 lives were bound together by compassion, gratitude, and the enduring power of a single selfless act. The soft glow of candlelight flickered gently across the table as the last notes of the piano drifted through the restaurant like a whispered lullaby, wrapping the evening in an atmosphere of warmth and quiet elegance. Amora Johnson admired the delicate silver bracelet encircling her wrist, its polished surface reflecting the golden light of the chandeliers above, while beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows the Chicago skyline sparkled like a sea of distant stars. Walter Hayes leaned back in his chair with a contented sigh, his eyes filled with peace he had not known in years. It has been a long time since I felt truly at home, he said softly. Alexander Hayes smiled, his voice gentle and steady. Home is not always a place, he replied. Sometimes it is the people who remind you that you belong. Amora looked at both men, her heart warmed by their words. Tonight feels like a dream, she admitted quietly. Walter chuckled, his laughter rich with gratitude. Then let us make sure it is a dream that continues, he said. As dessert plates were cleared away, Alexander rested his hands upon the table, his expression thoughtful yet resolute. The flicker of candlelight danced across his features, revealing a quiet determination that had shaped his rise to success. Amora, he began, his voice filled with sincerity, I have built companies that reach across the nation, but tonight you reminded me of something far more important than business. You reminded me of purpose. Amora listened attentively, her eyes shining with curiosity. Purpose, sir? She asked gently. Alexander nodded. Yes, he said. Kindness has the power to change lives. Because of you, my father is no longer forgotten, and I have been given a second chance to honor the man who taught me everything I know. I would like to ensure that your future is as bright as the light you bring to others. Walter's gaze softened with pride as he looked at Amora. You deserve every opportunity, my dear, he said. You carry a spirit that cannot be measured by circumstance. Amora hesitated, her voice humble. I only did what I thought was right. Alexander smiled warmly. And that is precisely why it matters, he replied. I would like to establish a scholarship in your name, one that will support your education and help you achieve any dream you choose to pursue. Amora's breath caught in wonder. A scholarship, for me, she whispered. For you, Alexander confirmed. And for other children who share your courage and compassion. It will be called the Grace Scholarship, inspired by the very quality you embody. Tears shimmered in Walter's eyes as he placed a gentle hand over Amora's. You see, child, he said softly, goodness never goes unnoticed. It finds its way back, just as surely as the dawn follows the night. Overcome with emotion, Amora smiled, her voice trembling with gratitude. Thank you, sir. I promise I will work hard and make you proud. Alexander inclined his head respectfully. You already have. As the evening drew to a close, the maître d' approached once more, offering a courteous nod. Mr. Hayes, your car is ready whenever you wish. Alexander stood and extended his hand first to Walter, then to Amora. Shall we? He asked. Walter rose with quiet dignity, carefully adjusting his coat as he tucked his cherished medal close to his heart. Amora stood beside him, her bracelet catching the light with every movement, a symbol of hope and new beginnings. Together, they walked toward the grand entrance, their reflections gliding across the polished marble floor. Conversation softened as guests watched them pass, their expressions filled with admiration and respect. Outside, the night air was crisp and fresh, the rain now gone, leaving the city streets gleaming beneath the glow of street lamps. The Chicago River shimmered in the distance, reflecting the brilliance of the skyline like a ribbon of light. As the black town car door opened, Alexander paused and looked at Amora with a gentle smile. Remember this night, he said. It began with a simple act of kindness, and it will continue to shape lives for years to come. Amora nodded, her eyes shining with hope as she stepped forward beside Walter. Beneath the vast American sky, illuminated by the radiant lights of the city, 3 souls bound by compassion stood united in purpose, their journey guided not by fortune alone, but by the enduring power of grace. The night air was crisp and serene as the black town car glided through the illuminated streets of Chicago, its headlights reflecting off the rain-washed pavement like ribbons of silver. Inside, a peaceful silence settled over Alexander Hayes, Walter Hayes, and Amora Johnson, each lost in quiet reflection as the city skyline stretched before them in a breathtaking display of light and promise. The towering buildings shimmered against the dark sky, their windows glowing like constellations, while the Chicago River mirrored their brilliance with gentle ripples. Amora pressed her face lightly against the cool glass, her wide brown eyes filled with wonder. It looks like the whole city is shining, she whispered softly. Walter followed her gaze, his voice warm with nostalgia. When I was a young man, I used to stand on these streets and dream of a future filled with hope, he said. Alexander smiled, his expression thoughtful. And tonight, those dreams are coming full circle, he replied. As the car crossed a bridge overlooking the river, the gentle hum of the engine blended with the distant murmur of the city. The reflection of Amora's silver bracelet sparkled faintly in the window, catching Alexander's attention. He regarded her with quiet admiration. You have reminded me of something I once knew but nearly forgot, he said gently. That true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in compassion. Amora turned toward him, her voice humble and sincere. My grandmother always says that kindness is the only treasure you can give away and still keep, she replied. Walter chuckled softly, pride shining in his eyes. Your grandmother must be a remarkable woman, he said. She raised you to carry light wherever you go. The car slowed to a smooth stop before an elegant high-rise overlooking the Chicago River. Its glass facade reflected the night sky like a mirror, and a row of warm lanterns illuminated the entrance. A uniformed concierge stepped forward as the driver opened the door, greeting Alexander with respectful familiarity. Welcome home, Mr. Hayes, he said. Alexander nodded politely. Thank you. He then turned to Walter and Amora. I would like you both to stay here tonight, he said gently. You deserve comfort and rest. Walter hesitated, his humility evident. I do not wish to impose, he said quietly. Alexander placed a reassuring hand on his father's shoulder. You are not imposing, he replied. You are family. Walter's eyes glistened with emotion as he nodded. Amora stepped onto the polished stone driveway, her sneakers reflecting the golden glow of the lanterns. She gazed upward in awe at the towering building. It is beautiful, she whispered. Alexander smiled warmly. This is only a place, he said. But what matters most is what we build within it. Inside, the lobby welcomed them with marble floors, soaring ceilings, and soft ambient lighting that bathed the space in elegance. A grand staircase curved gracefully beneath a crystal chandelier, and fresh lilies filled the air with a delicate fragrance. Amora walked beside Walter, her small hand resting gently on his arm as they crossed the gleaming floor. I never imagined I would see something like this, she said softly. Walter smiled. Sometimes life surprises us in the most beautiful ways, he replied. As they stepped into a private elevator, its mirrored walls reflected their images side by side, a young girl with a heart full of compassion, a veteran with a legacy of honor, and a son who had rediscovered his father and his purpose in a single evening. The doors closed with a gentle chime, carrying them upward toward a new beginning. When they arrived at the penthouse, the doors opened to reveal a breathtaking panorama of the Chicago skyline stretching for miles beneath the starlit sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the horizon, and the soft glow of the city illuminated the room like a living tapestry of light. Amora stepped forward in awe, her voice barely above a whisper. It feels like standing among the stars. Alexander smiled, watching her reaction with quiet satisfaction. Tonight, you have reminded us that even the smallest star can illuminate the darkest sky, he said. Walter placed his hand over his heart, his silver medal resting against his chest. And you have restored something I thought was lost forever, he added. Amora looked at them both, her eyes shining with gratitude and hope. I only followed my heart, she said softly. Alexander nodded, his voice filled with conviction. And because you did, our lives will never be the same. Outside, the city of Chicago shimmered beneath the night sky, its endless lights reflecting the promise of tomorrow. Within the warmth of the penthouse, three souls stood united by compassion and destiny, their journey guided not by wealth alone, but by the enduring power of kindness that had transformed an ordinary evening into a moment of lasting grace. Morning sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, painting the Chicago skyline in hues of gold and amber as the first light of dawn reflected across the calm waters of the river below. The city stirred gently to life, its distant hum rising like a quiet symphony, while inside the elegant suite, a sense of peace lingered in the air. Amora Johnson stood near the glass, her eyes wide with wonder as she gazed at the endless horizon. She had never seen a sunrise from so high above the world, and the sight filled her heart with hope. The silver bracelet on her wrist caught the morning light, glimmering like a promise of new beginnings. Behind her, Walter Hayes adjusted his neatly pressed jacket, his cherished medal resting proudly against his chest. His posture, once weary, now carried renewed strength, as though the years of hardship had lifted overnight. It has been a long time since I welcomed the day with such gratitude, he said softly. Amora turned toward him with a warm smile. It is beautiful, sir, she replied. It feels like the world is starting over. Walter nodded. In many ways, it is. At that moment, Alexander Hayes entered the room, his expression calm yet purposeful. He wore a tailored navy suit that reflected both elegance and authority, but his eyes held the warmth of a son who had rediscovered what truly mattered. Good morning, he said gently. I trust you both rested well. Walter smiled. Better than I have in years. Amora nodded. Politely. Yes, sir. Thank you for everything. Alexander returned her smile. You have already given us more than we could ever repay, he said. And today, we begin honoring that kindness. He gestured toward the city below, where the morning sun illuminated streets that bustled with possibility. There is something I would like you both to witness. Moments later, they descended to the building's private entrance, where a sleek black town car awaited them. The driver greeted them respectfully as they settled inside, and the vehicle glided through the awakening city. The early sunlight reflected off glass towers and historic brick buildings alike, creating a tapestry of old and new that mirrored their own journey. Amora watched in fascination as pedestrians hurried along sidewalks and the elevated trains rumbled softly overhead. "Where are we going?" she asked curiously. Alexander smiled. "You will see." The car soon arrived at the very restaurant where the previous evening had begun. Its elegant facade gleamed beneath the morning light, the lanterns now replaced by the gentle glow of day. As they stepped out onto the sidewalk, Amora recognized the place instantly. Her heart fluttered with surprise. Walter placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Do not be afraid," he said kindly. Alexander approached the entrance with quiet confidence. The manager and staff stood waiting, their expressions respectful and sincere. The maître d' stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes, we are honored by your presence," he said. Alexander inclined his head politely. "Thank you," he replied. "Today, we gather not for a meal, but for a new beginning." He turned to Amora and Walter, his voice steady with purpose. "Last night, this place witnessed an act of compassion that reminded us all of what truly matters. Today, it will stand as a symbol of dignity and gratitude." The manager nodded respectfully. "We are prepared to support your vision in any way." Alexander placed a gentle hand on Walter's shoulder and then gestured toward Amora. Effective immediately, he announced, "This establishment will partner with the Hayes Foundation to provide daily meals for veterans in need. And in honor of the young lady whose kindness inspired this initiative, we will establish the Grace Scholarship Fund to support children of courage and compassion." A hush fell over the gathering as the significance of his words settled into the morning air. Amora's eyes widened in disbelief, her voice trembling with emotion. "For me," she whispered. Alexander smiled warmly. "Because of you," he replied. Walter's eyes glistened with pride. "You have done more than you realize, child," he said gently. "You have restored honor and reminded us all of our duty to one another." As the sunlight illuminated the entrance, its golden rays reflected off Walter's medal and Amora's bracelet, symbols of sacrifice and grace united by destiny. The city moved around them, vibrant and alive, but in that moment, time seemed to stand still. Amora looked at Alexander and Walter, her heart overflowing with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. Alexander nodded, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "No, Amora. Thank you for reminding us that kindness has the power to change the world." Beneath the bright American sky, surrounded by the promise of a new day, their journey continued, guided by compassion, strengthened by redemption, and illuminated by the enduring light of hope. The morning sun rose higher above the Chicago skyline, casting brilliant rays of light across the bustling streets as a small crowd gathered outside the elegant restaurant. News of the philanthropic announcement spread swiftly through the city, drawing reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers who lined the sidewalk with anticipation. Microphones gleamed beneath the sunlight, and cameras flashed in quick succession, capturing the moment as Alexander Hayes stood beside Walter Hayes and Amora Johnson at the entrance. The crisp autumn air carried a sense of excitement, mingling with the distant hum of traffic and the rhythmic footsteps of passers-by. Amora clasped her hands gently in front of her, her silver bracelet catching the light with every subtle movement, while Walter stood tall with quiet dignity, his cherished medal gleaming proudly against his chest. Alexander stepped forward, his presence commanding yet composed, and offered a warm smile to the assembled crowd. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady and resonant. "Today marks the beginning of a mission rooted not in wealth, but in compassion." A respectful silence fell as he continued. "Last night, an extraordinary act of kindness reminded me that true greatness lies in how we treat one another. A young girl, with nothing but a generous heart, chose to help a forgotten hero. Her courage restored more than dignity. It restored hope." Murmurs of admiration rippled through the crowd as reporters scribbled notes. A journalist raised her hand. "Mr. Hayes, is it true that you are establishing a foundation in her honor?" Alexander nodded, Yes, he replied. The Grace Scholarship Fund will support children who demonstrate compassion and integrity, ensuring that their dreams are never limited by circumstance. Applause rose from the crowd, echoing against the glass facade of the building. Amora's eyes widened in astonishment, her breath catching as she realized the magnitude of what had begun with a simple gesture. Walter placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You have changed lives, my dear," he said softly. Another reporter turned toward Walter. "Sir, how does it feel to witness this moment?" Walter smiled, his voice filled with humility. "It is a blessing," he answered. "I served my country with honor, but today I am reminded that the greatest service we can offer is kindness." The crowd responded with heartfelt applause. The restaurant manager stepped forward, presenting a polished plaque that gleamed in the sunlight. Engraved upon it were the words "Grace Dining Initiative in honor of Amora Johnson." Alexander accepted it and turned to Amora with a gentle smile. "This belongs to you," he said. Hesitating for a moment, Amora accepted the plaque with trembling hands. "I never expected anything like this," she whispered. Alexander's voice softened with reassurance. "Kindness often returns in ways we never imagine," he said. Cameras flashed as Amora stood between Alexander and Walter, her expression radiant with humility and gratitude. The sunlight illuminated their faces, casting a warm glow that seemed to symbolize unity and hope. Across the street, passers-by paused to watch, their expressions reflecting admiration and inspiration. Some wiped away tears, moved by the story unfolding before them. As the applause faded, Alexander addressed the crowd once more. "Let this day serve as a reminder," he said. "No act of compassion is ever too small. When we uplift one another, we build a future worthy of our shared humanity." Walter lifted his medal gently, its silver surface glinting beneath the morning light. "Honor is not only found on the battlefield," he said. "It is found in the hearts of those who choose kindness over indifference." Amora looked up at both men, her voice filled with quiet determination. "I promise to use this opportunity to help others, just as you have helped me," she said. The crowd erupted into applause once again, their cheers echoing through the city streets. The Chicago skyline shimmered behind them, a breathtaking backdrop to a moment that would be remembered for years to come. As the cameras captured the scene, the sunlight reflected off Walter's medal and Amora's bracelet, symbols of sacrifice and grace united by destiny. In that radiant morning light, the echoes of judgment had vanished, replaced by admiration and respect, and the simple kindness of one young girl had blossomed into a legacy that would inspire generations to come. The applause gradually softened into a gentle murmur as the morning sun climbed higher above the Chicago skyline, casting a warm golden glow across the gathered crowd. Reporters began lowering their microphones, and photographers captured their final images before stepping aside, allowing the moment to settle into memory. Amora Johnson stood quietly beside Walter Hayes and Alexander Hayes, her heart still fluttering with disbelief as she held the engraved plaque close to her chest. The sunlight shimmered against her silver bracelet, its delicate engraving spelling grace like a promise etched into her future. She looked up at Alexander with eyes filled with gratitude and wonder. "I still cannot believe this is real," she whispered softly. Alexander smiled gently, his voice calm and reassuring. "It is real, Amora," he said. "And it is only the beginning." Walter placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his expression filled with pride. "You have shown the world what true honor looks like," he said warmly. "Not through medals or titles, but through compassion." Amora lowered her gaze modestly. "I only helped because it was the right thing to do," she replied. Alexander nodded, admiration evident in his eyes. "And that is why it matters," he said. "The greatest changes in history have always begun with simple acts of kindness." As the crowd dispersed, the street returned to its usual rhythm, yet an air of inspiration lingered in the morning breeze. Across the sidewalk, a small group of veterans gathered quietly, their caps held respectfully over their hearts. One elderly man stepped forward, his voice steady but emotional. "Miss Johnson," he said, "on behalf of those who served, thank you for reminding the world that we are not forgotten." Amora's eyes shimmered with emotion as she bowed her head politely. "It was an honor, sir," she replied. Walter's chest swelled with pride, his medal catching the sunlight as though it shared in the moment. Alexander extended his hand to the veteran with respect. "Today marks a new chapter," he said. "The Hayes Foundation will ensure that every veteran in need receives support, dignity, and care." The veteran nodded gratefully. "Then this city is better because of you," he said. As he stepped back, Amora glanced at Alexander with curiosity. "What happens now?" she asked. Alexander smiled thoughtfully. "Now, we build the future," he replied. He gestured toward a sleek black town car waiting nearby. "There is someone I would like you to meet." Moments later, the car carried them through sunlit streets lined with historic architecture and towering skyscrapers, eventually arriving in front of a modest brick home on a quiet residential block. The autumn breeze rustled golden leaves along the sidewalk, and the air carried the comforting scent of freshly brewed coffee drifting from an open window. Amora's eyes widened with recognition. "This is my grandmother's house," she said softly. Alexander nodded. "She deserves to hear the news from you," he replied. Walter smiled warmly. "A heart like yours is never shaped alone," he added. Amora stepped onto the porch and gently knocked. The door opened to reveal her grandmother, Mrs. Evelyn Johnson, her kind eyes widening in surprise. "Amora," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with concern and relief. "Child, where have you been?" Amora rushed forward and embraced her. "Grandma, everything has changed," she said breathlessly. Evelyn looked past her, noticing Alexander's refined presence and Walter's dignified stance. "Oh my," she murmured. Walter removed his cap respectfully. He said warmly. "Your granddaughter has restored more than hope. She has restored honor." Alexander offered a courteous nod. "Mrs. Johnson, it is a privilege to meet you," he said. "Your granddaughter's compassion reunited me with my father and inspired a foundation that will serve countless lives. I have come to ensure that both of you have every opportunity you deserve." Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as she placed her hands gently on Amora's shoulders. "I always told you that kindness would open doors," she whispered. Amora smiled, her voice filled with emotion. "You were right, Grandma." As sunlight streamed across the quiet porch, illuminating their faces with a radiant glow, the truth of her grandmother's words settled into the moment. The journey that began with a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a legacy of hope, dignity, and grace, proving that even the smallest light could illuminate the path toward a brighter tomorrow. Golden sunlight streamed across the quiet porch, wrapping the modest brick home in a warm and hopeful glow as Amora Johnson stood hand in hand with her grandmother, Evelyn Johnson, while Alexander Hayes and Walter Hayes looked on with quiet pride. The gentle autumn breeze carried the rustling of amber leaves along the sidewalk, and the distant hum of Chicago's morning traffic blended into a soft, steady rhythm, as though the city itself acknowledged the significance of the moment. Evelyn's eyes shimmered with tears as she gazed at her granddaughter, her voice filled with emotion and pride. "I always knew your kindness would lead you somewhere extraordinary," she said softly. Amora smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude as she held her grandmother's hand. "You taught me everything I know, Grandma," she replied. Walter removed his cap respectfully, his silver hair catching the sunlight as his cherished medal glinted against his chest. He said warmly, "Your granddaughter did more than offer help. She restored dignity to a forgotten soldier and reunited a father with his son." Evelyn placed a hand over her heart, deeply moved. "Then she has honored not only your service, but the values we hold dear," she said gently. Alexander stepped forward, his voice calm yet filled with sincerity. "Mrs. Johnson, it is because of your guidance that Amora has changed our lives," he said. "Through the Hayes Foundation, we will ensure that her future, and the futures of many others, are filled with opportunity. Your family will always have our support." Evelyn nodded with humble gratitude. "What matters most," she replied, "is that she continues to use her heart to help others." Amora's silver bracelet caught the sunlight, its engraved word grace glowing like a quiet promise. She looked at Alexander and Walter with shining eyes. "I promise I will never forget what this day means," she said. "I will work hard, learn all I can, and help as many people as possible." Walter smiled proudly. "That is the true meaning of honor," he said. "Not what we receive, but what we give." As the morning unfolded, Alexander invited them to join him for a dedication ceremony at a nearby Veterans Memorial overlooking the Chicago River. A short time later, they stood together beneath a clear blue sky, the American flag waving gently above a polished granite monument engraved with the names of those who had served. Sunlight shimmered across the water, reflecting like scattered diamonds, and a peaceful silence settled over the scene. Walter approached the monument with reverence, his posture straight and dignified as he gently touched the engraved stone. Amora stood beside him, her eyes filled with respect, while Alexander watched with quiet admiration. Walter carefully removed his medal and held it in his hands, its silver surface gleaming beneath the sunlight. He turned to Amora, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "This medal represents courage, sacrifice, and service," he said. "Today, I entrust it to you, not as a possession, but as a symbol. Carry it in your heart as a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can change the world." Amora's breath caught as she looked at him. "Sir, I cannot accept something so precious," she said softly. Walter smiled and gently closed her fingers around it before returning it to his own chest. "You have already earned its meaning," he replied. "And its spirit will guide you wherever you go." Alexander stepped forward, his voice resonating with quiet conviction. "From this day forward, the Grace Scholarship and the Veterans Dignity Initiative will stand as lasting tributes to compassion and honor," he declared. "They began with a single act of kindness and will continue to inspire generations to come." The breeze stirred softly, lifting the edges of Amora's hair as she gazed at the monument, her heart filled with determination. "I will make you proud," she said gently. Walter placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You already have." Evelyn smiled, her eyes shining with joy. "And you always will." As the American flag rippled against the brilliant blue sky, the sunlight reflected from Walter's medal and Amora's bracelet, symbols of sacrifice and grace united by destiny. The Chicago skyline rose in the distance, a testament to dreams built through perseverance and hope. In that radiant moment, beneath the vast American sky, their journey reached its heartfelt conclusion, proving that true wealth lies not in fortune or status, but in compassion, dignity, and the enduring power of a single act of kindness that forever changed their lives.